3 minutes ago, Congressman Thomas Massie just cornered FBI Director Kash Patel in a way that should make every American demand answers. He dismantled Patel's claim that Jeffrey Epstein's files contain no credible information about anyone else involved in sex trafficking. Here's what just happened. Patel testified to the Senate there's no evidence Epstein trafficked women to anyone besides himself. But Massie came with receipts. He cited FBI FD 302 interview reports from the 2019 investigation naming at least 20 men whom victims identified. Not conspiracy theories, official FBI witness statements from cooperating victims. The list is chilling. Banking CEO Jess Staley, a royal prince, a Hollywood producer, a prominent musician, a government official, a former politician, multiple billionaires including one from Canada, a rock star, a magician. Victims named these people. The FBI documented their testimony. Patel's response: multiple authorities have looked at what we have. That's deflection. Massie exposed this. Either those 302s don't say what victims claim, meaning the FBI fabricated statements, or they do. And 3 administrations chose not to prosecute despite victim testimony naming specific perpetrators. Massie also revealed that the day he introduced a petition to release these files, DOJ rushed documents to influencers and failed to redact victims' names. The same victims whose privacy FBI now claims to protect by hiding evidence about their abusers. This is a congressman citing FBI documents and a director who can't explain why no one's been charged.
Gentleman,
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman's recognized.
So I've got 4 documents I'd like to introduce into the record. The first one is Jeffrey Epstein's 6 story played out for years in plain sight. And Acosta is quoted in here saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document is entitled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third document is from Fox Digital. It's titled, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Admin Official CIA Chief." And the last document is Wall Street Journal article that highlights Ehud Barak's 36 meetings with Jeffrey Epstein. He was the former Prime Minister of Israel and head of military intelligence for Israel. It may have held that title when he met Epstein, and then, yes.
Without objection, the gentleman will hold for a second. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one UC request. This is Judge Engelmeyer's decision from August in U.S. versus Epstein, stating the government's 100,000 pages of Epstein files dwarfs the 70-odd pages of Epstein grand jury materials.
Without objection, the gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Patel, I watched some of your Senate hearing yesterday when Senator Kennedy asked you, "You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these women to besides himself?" You replied, according to the transcript, "There is no credible information that he trafficked them to anyone else." You also said somewhere in the hearing and here today that the problem is that the case files are constrained by limited search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and that the non-prosecution agreement hamstrung future investigations. Those constraints only apply to Southern District of Florida. They do not apply to Southern District of New York, the location of the 2019 sex trafficking indictment, which produced many things, including a series of FD 302 documents. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI in that investigation, these documents in FBI possession, your possession, detail at least 20 men, including Mr. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked victims to, victims including minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, may she rest in peace. That list also includes at least 19 other individuals, one Hollywood producer worth a few $100 million, one royal prince, one high-profile individual in the music industry, one very prominent banker, one high-profile government official, one high-profile former politician, one owner of a car company in Italy, one rock star, one magician, at least 6 billionaires, including a billionaire from Canada. We know these people exist in the FBI files, the files that you control. I don't know exactly who they are, but the FBI does. Have you launched any investigations into any of these people And have you seen these 302 documents?
Sir, I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. And we're working with Congress not only to divulge that information and produce it to you, but any investigations that arise from any credible investigation will be brought. There have been no new materials brought to me launching a new indictment.
So is the loophole here, or is it your assertion that these victims aren't credible, that the 302s maybe didn't produce credible statements that rise to a probable cause?
It's not my assertion, sir. It's the assertion of two different United States attorneys' offices from three separate administrations who investigated those same materials in live time.
Are the 302 documents in the FBI's possession?
They reviewed all that, yes, sir.
And so have you reviewed those 302 documents where the victims name the people who victimized them?
If I personally know, but the FBI has.
So how can you sit here and in front of the Senate and say there are no names?
I said
I named one today.
I said we are not in the practice at the Department of Justice FBI of releasing victims' names. That is not what we do. We are also not in the habit of releasing incredible information. That's not what we do. But multiple authorities have looked at the entirety of what we have.
Okay, I got to move on here. Were you present when the AG had the White House event when she released the binders to the social media influencers?
I was, yes.
So if you're willing to meet with social media influencers who stood to benefit from the sensational and sad stories of these victims, will you meet with the victims as well?
The FBI will meet with anyone who has new information.
Will you personally meet with them?
The FBI and the professionals who are handling the cases will.
Were you instructed that it was important to release the documents to the Oversight Committee on the day of my introduction of the discharge petition to release these files?
I don't know what day that was, so no.
Well, they were released that day, and there were victims' names who weren't redacted because they were in such a rush, and the victims are not happy about that. Have you investigated any of the CIA connections? Have you seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? And if you wanted to see it, would they show it to you?
Well, I can speak for the FBI, and that's presuming there's a CIA case file. And I've reviewed everything that the interagency, not I, the FBI, that was provided to us.
Would you be willing to look at the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein?
If there is such a file, and if it has not already been turned over to the FBI will look at any new investigative leads.
Have you made any progress on the pipe bomb investigation January 6th? And have you made any progress on the motive of the Las Vegas shooter?
As to the first, it's an ongoing investigation, and we have made progress. As to the second, sir, I'll have to get back to you.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous
Gentleman
consent
yields back.
request.
Unanimous consent request from the gentleman from New York.
I ask unanimous consent to introduce an unsigned memorandum from July 7, 2025 that says we did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties with the insignia of the Department of Justice and the FBI.
Without objection.
What Thomas Massie just did wasn't grandstanding. It was surgical exposure of how institutional evasion works when powerful people are implicated. I need you to understand the specific claims he made and why Kash Patel's responses should alarm anyone who believes in equal justice. Massie started by dismantling Patel's constraint argument. Patel has been testifying that Epstein case files are limited by 2006 to 2007 search warrants and hamstrung by the non-prosecution agreement in the Southern District of Florida. That sounds reasonable, until Massie pointed out those constraints only apply to Florida, not to the Southern District of New York, which indicted Epstein in 2019 on sex trafficking charges and conducted extensive victim interviews. Those interviews produced FD 302 documents, official FBI reports memorializing witness statements. According to Massie, those 302s name at least 20 men whom victims said Epstein trafficked them to. He listed categories: banking CEO Jess Staley, a royal prince, a Hollywood producer worth hundreds of millions, a prominent musician, a government official, a former politician, an Italian car company owner, a rock star, a magician, and at least 6 billionaires, including one from Canada. Massie didn't name them publicly, but he made clear the FBI knows exactly who they are because victims named them in sworn interviews. So Massie asked, Have you launched investigations into any of these people? Have you even reviewed these 302 documents? Patel's answer: I have asked my FBI agents to review the entirety of the Epstein files and bring forth any credible information. Then he added that multiple U.S. attorney offices from 3 separate administrations reviewed these materials and found nothing warranting new indictments. Let me unpack why that's deeply troubling. First, Patel admitted he hasn't personally reviewed the 302 documents naming these individuals. The director of the FBI, when asked about specific witness statements identifying 20 potential accomplices, hasn't looked at the documents himself. Second, his answer shifts responsibility to prosecutors in previous administrations without explaining why discretion was exercised to protect the accused rather than pursue the named perpetrators. Here's the institutional problem. When you have victim testimony naming specific individuals, documented in official FBI interviews, and no charges are brought across 3 administrations, you have to ask, what standard of evidence is being applied? If victim testimony identifying perpetrators isn't enough to even open an investigation, then what would be? Massey then exposed contradictory priorities. He asked if Patel was present when the Attorney General released Epstein document binders to social media influencers at a White House event. Patel confirmed he was there. Massey asked, if you're willing to meet with influencers who benefit from sensationalizing victim stories, will you personally meet with the victims themselves? Patel deflected, saying professionals handling the cases would conduct those meetings, not him. The director has time for a White House media event, but won't commit to personally meeting victims whose testimony is supposedly being protected. Massey also pointed out that documents released to influencers weren't properly redacted. Victims' names were exposed because the release was rushed, and it happened the same day Massey introduced a discharge petition to force release of the files. That timing suggests the release wasn't about transparency. It was about controlling the narrative before Congress could force broader disclosure. Then Massey asked about CIA connections. He cited multiple reports stating Epstein had intelligence ties and that officials were told to leave it alone because he belonged to intelligence. Massey asked if Patel had seen the CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein. Patel's answer was carefully constructed. I've reviewed everything the interagency provided to us. Notice he didn't say there's no CIA file. He said he's reviewed what the CIA gave the FBI. That leaves open the possibility that a CIA file exists but hasn't been shared. When Massey pressed whether Patel would look at the CIA file if it exists, Patel said the FBI will look at any new investigative leads. That's not a commitment to demand access. It's conditional. If the CIA volunteers information, we'll review it. But there's no indication Patel is actively seeking intelligence agency records despite documented reports of those connections. Here's what this exchange reveals. You have victim testimony naming specific perpetrators. You have FBI documents memorializing that testimony. You have multiple administrations that decline to prosecute. And you have a current FBI director who hasn't personally reviewed the 302s, won't commit to meeting victims, rushed document releases that exposed victim identities, and hasn't pursued intelligence agency files despite credible reporting of Epstein's connections. That's not investigation failure. That's investigation avoidance. And the pattern suggests protection, not incompetence. Massey ended by asking about 2 other unresolved investigations, the January 6th pipe bombs and the Las Vegas shooter's motive. Patel said the pipe bomb investigation is ongoing, but offered no details. On Las Vegas, he said he'd have to get back to Massey. Both are non-answers for cases that remain unresolved years later. The institutional message is clear. High-profile cases that implicate powerful interests don't get resolved, they get managed. Evidence gets reviewed by multiple authorities who all conclude nothing actionable exists. Witnesses get their names released to influencers, but don't get meetings with the director. Files that might explain intelligence connections don't get pursued. If you believe justice should be equal regardless of wealth or power, this should infuriate you. What Massey demonstrated is that the evidence exists. Victim testimony, FBI documentation, credible reporting of intelligence ties. But the will to act doesn't. And when institutions have evidence but lack will, it's not because the evidence is insufficient. It's because the targets are protected. Demand accountability. Ask your representatives why 20 named individuals in FBI 302 documents haven't been investigated. Ask why the FBI director won't commit to reading those documents himself. Ask why intelligence agency connections aren't being pursued. Because if those questions don't get answers, you're watching justice become a two-tier system where victims name their abusers and nothing happens.